Hi everyone, I'm Connie. Welcome to Connie's Diaries, a space where we have honest conversations about ambition, growth, and becoming. I want to start today's episode with a moment I will never forget. A few weeks ago, I opened an email telling me that I'd been accepted into a doctorate. You'd think I'd feel excited, proud, relieved, but my first thought wasn't any of those things. It was, did they make a mistake? And that scared me because it made me realize something. It didn't matter that I spent years building a business. It didn't matter that I achieved goals that younger me could only dream about. Every time I reached a milestone, instead of thinking, I did it, I'd immediately start wondering, do I actually deserve this? Or did I just get lucky? If you've ever had that feeling, today's conversation is for you. We are talking about imposter syndrome, not as psychologists, not as experts, just as a person trying to make sense of something that many of us quietly carry. When I first started reading about imposter syndrome, one statistic surprised me. Around 70% people experience it at some point in their lives. 70%? That means most of us will, at some stage, feel like we don't deserve our own success. The term imposter syndrome was first introduced in 1978 by psychologists Pauline Clance and Susanna Imes. They noticed a pattern among high-achieving women. No matter how successful they became, many still believed they'd somehow fooled everyone around them. That one day, someone would realize they weren't actually capable. When I first read that, I remember thinking, that sounds uncomfortably familiar. Because here's the strange thing about imposter syndrome. It doesn't disappear when you achieve something. It simply moves the goalpost. You reach one goal, then immediately start questioning whether you deserve the next one. When I started Couch Potato Education, I wasn't trying to build a company. I was simply teaching English online. One student, then another, then another. I didn't have a business background. I didn't have investors. I didn't have a detailed business plan. I just believed there had to be a better way to teach languages. Early on, I joined the startup program. I remember feeling excited. I thought I'd finally get advice from people who understood entrepreneurship. Instead, after pitching my idea, one mentor told me that she didn't think the business had a future. I remember going home that day and replaying the conversation over and over again. Maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe I'd completely misunderstood what it took to build a company. For a few days, I genuinely questioned whether I should stop. But something inside me kept saying, what if she's wrong? So I kept going. Not because I felt confident, because I believed in what I was building, even when I didn't fully believe in myself. And I honestly thought, once the company grows, this feeling will disappear. It didn't. When I hired my first teacher, I wondered whether I was qualified to judge someone else's teaching. When I sent proposals to schools, I'd press send and immediately wonder whether they were laughing at it. When schools started saying yes, I didn't think, maybe I'm doing something right. I thought, I hope I can live up to their expectations. Then came to my doctorate application. I remember reading my personal statement one last time before submitting it. Not thinking, I hope I get in, but wondering, who am I to even apply? When I received my offer, I stared at the screen for a while. Instead of celebrating, my first thought was, did they make a mistake? Looking back now, that's probably the clearest example of imposter syndrome I've ever experienced. The achievement changed, the doubt didn't. Something I've found really interesting is that research constantly shows women report higher levels of imposter syndrome than men. There are probably many reasons for that. One is how many of us are raised. We are often praised for being careful, being responsible, getting things right. So when we make mistakes, it can feel much bigger than it really is. Another reason is representation. When you are the youngest person in the room, the only woman in the meeting, or simply someone who doesn't see many people like yourself, it's easy to question whether you belong there. And I think cultural expectations play a role too. Growing up in Hong Kong, academic achievement was important, working hard was expected, doing well wasn't something to celebrate. It was simply what you were supposed to do. So instead of asking, am I proud of myself? Many of us grow up asking, could I have done even better? That mindset doesn't suddenly disappear when you become an adult. It follows you into your career, into your relationships, into every new opportunity. I'm still learning how to deal with this. I don't think there's a magic solution, but there are a few things that really help me. The first is naming it. Sometimes I would tell myself, this isn't reality. This is imposter syndrome talking. It doesn't make the feeling disappear, but it reminds me that feelings aren't always facts. The second is remembering that caring deeply about your work doesn't mean you are incapable. Sometimes the people who question themselves the most are also the people who care the most. And finally, I've stopped waiting to feel ready, because I don't think that day is ever coming. I built my company before I felt like a founder. I applied for a doctorate before I felt like a researcher. I've realized that confidence isn't something that appears before you act. It's something that slowly grows because you acted anyway. Before we finish today, I want to leave you with one thought. Maybe you've been waiting until you feel ready. Ready to apply, ready to leave, ready to start, ready to build. Maybe that day never comes. Because when I look back on every meaningful decision I've ever made, none of them happened after I felt confident. They happened while I was scared, while I doubted myself, while I wondered whether I belonged. Maybe confidence isn't the goal. Maybe courage is. Because courage is showing up before you feel ready. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome? What did it sound like in your own head? Thank you so much for spending this time with me. This has been Connie's Diaries. Until next time, keep becoming.